Ignorance. But not dangerous ignorance. 야, 다 시신류인다.
So we will read from the next chapter, the chapter on awareness.
파유 세야디 개츠부 쇼르샤. 다 뒤균데네 지다 머럽 재민이 삼바로. 샤는 나가 재민이 삼바치기. 삼부티 근데네 여대비비나. 에는 거지 지 류마 저 토유도잖아요. 어떤 레벨이지샤 뒤치죠 말이에요. 삼바치기. 에니 그 참바디의 내용에 제롱어도 메롱 가리면데 즉 애니시 내용에 엔다는 신기 즉 류마가 자와 간다 가는 이면이다. 류마 이승부 자와 간다 가는 이면이나 엔지 자와 대처는 누구여든 시신기지야. 진짜 바유 개심사리샤.
So we just finished reading the chapter on heedfulness, and I think this faculty of heedfulness is very important. And because once you have heedfulness, then, for example, the understanding that I should not indulge in actions of body, speech, and mind that are destructive and harmful. I should not indulge in actions of body, speech, and mind that would aggravate my afflictions and so on. Once you have that kind of determination, and when you maintain heedfulness constantly, then because of that quality of your mind, the behavioral actions that will come out of your body, speech, and mind will be more in tune with that kind of value that you uphold. So therefore, the application of heedfulness is a very important factor. And once you have that, then you use the introspective awareness or meta awareness to monitor whether your body, actions of body, speech, and mind are in tune with that value or not. So that's where the role of awareness comes in.
다지네 러버송 되바이 르브도 dimne 심송도 심도 송 맞잖아. 러버송 용민이 심게 람보 양다 남이 나바 제바다 랑지모 녀바 있는 뇌미시스. 다 심송도 같이 모르겠어. 지기다 심송야 조디 창조 심체. 다 대행이 가서 그래. 다 코르서래. 제가 다 뒤균되네. 다시 상도 동정. 그래서 주요에 있니. 찬식 심배타네. 아니 직시하는 내심 다도 좋대. 간다 창조 심 글럽 좀 게라. 그래서 제니
So the chapter opens with the following two stanzas. This chapter is called Guarding Awareness. Those who wish to protect their, this is on page number 47. Those who wish to protect their practice should zealously guard their mind. The practice cannot be protected without guarding the unsteady mind. Then it reads, untamed, mad elephants do not inflict as much harm in this world as does the unleashed elephant of the mind in the Avicii hell and the like. So although as a Bodhisattva practitioner, the principal mind that one needs to guard is really Bodhicitta, the awakening mind. But as a means towards that, one also needs to ensure that one's overall outlook of mind is more healthy. And therefore, it is important to guard one's mind in the general sense and to ensure that one does not slide into infractions of Bodhisattva precepts that one has adopted, so that one guards one's mind so that the mind does not become kind of violated by these infraction of the Bodhisattva precepts. That's where the guarding, the introspective awareness becomes important.
다지르니 룡하게 니주도면 아니 이지 니주도면 실산에 이리 카르도와 변한다 미기주나 차샤비니 룡하게 뜻해디 한지 삼바 좋아 안다 삼배나 지군론도 지녀모도 뜻해지니 두시도 좀 무시 냐치 되는 신에 다 룡하게 니주해야지 다 이지 남선 내심스는 거라 삼고 특식 거다지다 레임도와 사진이 이르잖아요 그 지금 전시대야 이인주도야 전시대야 생각이 로 거로 장고 가야지야 명함이 이주도야 생각이야 또 라가를 지르다 이이다 삼고 같이 주의하면서 직진 최대 남도도 만들고 찍다 다들 장도 이식 삼고 만들어서 주제디 다 장고 찍고 가야지야 그는 소다가 그런 수준나 차샤는 패지를 융하게 내주던 것도 좋으리 현유 시절 잡아 도배 달라고 차이잖아요 샤는 무슨 내용이지 달 융하게 저티체 뜻이 좋체 또 전주선배 럭전나 내용들 다른 생각을 럭전나 내용을 조 이진이 보통 해야 돼 조요가 내용도 와 그것도 철주 와다지 전시돼야 돼
So generally, when it comes to applying the faculty of mindfulness and awareness with respect to our body, speech, and mind, generally it is easier to apply mindfulness and awareness to the physical and verbal actions. So these are, destructive actions that manifest at, at the level of body and our speech. So, for example, if you look at the basic morality in terms of refraining from the 10 negative actions, the negative actions of body, speech, and mind, body and speech, if you look at what constitutes the execution of a particular negative action, there are many factors involved. There is the state of mind, and then there is the actual execution, there is the completion of that act, and within the states of mind underlying that action, there is the intention, there is the state of mind at the moment of the action, and so on. So there are kind of certain stages that ultimately culminate in the actual execution of the act. Whereas if you compare these negative actions of body and speech to the negative actions of the mind, such as covetousness, ill will, and so on, then the temporal stage that you have is very short, because the moment ill will arises, that constitutes the actual execution of the action. There is no underlying states of mind, there is no physical action involved. So therefore, application of mindfulness and awareness at the level of mind with respect to mental actions is much harder. It is of a greater challenge. So therefore, to be successfully able to apply mindfulness and awareness with respect to mental action, one needs to be much more trained, mentally much more trained, and also there need to be a much greater level of refined application of these qualities. And so, for example, in the case of observance of morality, basic morality, including the individual liberation vows, which includes the basic morality, there again, the application of the mindfulness and awareness is more at the level of physical and verbal action. So the key point is that the subtler the field is where you are applying these two faculties, the more trained you need to be, and also more refined your application of these faculties need to be.
다들 다 류가 예수는 심 조인 것이 소용 거야. 그래서 동해기직 뜻을 자디에 제기다 별로 차셔나 보나 15코에 동해를 자야 돼. 대나진데 15 쳐지고 시대를 공대서 또 생각 가는 용도도 와. 다들 개별 처사셔 있나? 아니 진수 바로도 심부사들 자디 또 생각도는 용도를 대sun 거야.
So earlier I forgot that. So if you compared the basic individual liberation vows to Bodhisattva vows and Tantric vows, then at the individual liberation vow, the primary focus is on the kind of restraint of the physical and verbal expressions of the afflicted states of mind, whereas at the level of Bodhisattva ethics and Vajrayana ethics, morality, then the application of the restraint is really at the level of mind. So these level of morality seem to be much subtler. And so then Shantideva explains in the text the centrality of the role of mind, whether it is with respect to falling into extremes, such as the extremes of cyclic existence, or the extreme of solitary, isolated nirvana. In both of these cases, it is the role of the mind is very central. And similarly, in the context of developing and cultivating virtues, such as the perfection of giving and so on, again there, the role of the mind is central. So it is the development of the mind that determines one's level of perfection.
Yeah. That is good.
So we'll then read stanza 18 of the text, which is on page 4. So we read in the Shantideva's text, therefore, I should well control and well guard my mind. Once I have forsaken the vow guarding the mind, of what use are many vows to me? And then we will read stanza 23, where Shantideva writes the following: I appeal to those wishing to guard their minds. Always diligently guard your mindfulness and awareness.
And
then the question on what kind of conditions that would give rise to mindfulness and introspective awareness, then these are explained in stanza 30.
Kenden kuishela chambatala yiduke. Teishindu sanje shenju sambada udu thome sigonde, deda thamji jangana tagwardang nesu she, deda samne ngosada kuydan jingde tishin ne. Teni sanje jesu chamba tela yangda yangdung chung.
So Shantideva writes here the conditions that would give rise to mindfulness and introspective awareness. So he writes in stanza 30, mindfulness easily arises for those of good fortune because of their association with a spiritual mentor, and for those who are reverent on account of the instruction of a preceptor and because of their fear. Then he writes, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have unobstructed vision in all directions. Everything is in their presence, and I stand in front of them. And then he continues, meditating thus, one should remain filled with a sense of propriety, respect, and fear, and one should repeatedly think of the Buddhas in this way.
다디 슈구데 강스 템바 이구네 순 원장을 디슬미도 라마타는 저거래 다 라마디 개심을 쳐요 그냥 아주 랍저로종 야니 근데 용도 마요 사디 기겐 다 비타고 가야지 다 참에 신세라 봐 다가는 신기 근데 랍저를 찾아বে 이네 지 루주 잡아야고 용도 마요 사디 그냥 기겐기 내 쳐봐 연구를 봤다 기겐기 지금 기겐 코랑 지금 잡아 상고 지금 넘주 상고 근데 제베이나 야 랑슈디 지 가서리 슈긴르지 루주소래 거야 소지 근데 이번 이두산에 다 안데 지금 타바도 탐지팀 고반 중매지기 다 람든 계신이 생기 어다 거라 천상을 봐야 돼 하정 개심 송을 저들이 늦음된 대기 뒤에 내게 라마네 송지 얘기 상아 도시로는 파르기 라메 천이 14호 전에 송해야 돼 거라 라메 가서 왔다 다 그게 땡제 슝 가리네 급쳐서 뒤다슝 당마 땡 누긴 진상 그래 다디 님부수 되베이는 롱도가 연대니 고야리 캐베 연대다 드베 연대니 고야리 가서 괜히 시작하는 시리 캐베 연대면 산제베 취 냠는 치아생인데 남주기 꼭 강산에 삼다는 냠는 치아지 비잖아요 삼동다 십시고 알아 롱자참 퇴거 롱퇴버성이야 야지 사실은 할아야 말이야. 양고 룬드 쟤네 대신 뭐 거야. 뺏겨지 못해. 근데 인도산에 되는데다 남주던데 봐. 태백이 되는데 봐. 다 되네 이제 당화 등에 가서다. 안들 남아디 줌생이 말해. 루주생이 말해. 루주생에도 줌생이 배이는 시윤상기 시적거리 시적삼이 나가 뒤로 봐. 안데 론 뒤서싱이기 론 뒤지 계신이 배인도 자네 계신이 권한래야 지 셴 뒤접 제하게 냠용 이해다 냠용 그래서 연거래 코랑 그 라랭게니 냠용 개월 마도 랑 라랭 마게라 냠용 개야 야물 봐 저들이 인도 자네 두배게 된다 봐 어다 키도 닌데 스코야데 백해지 모르셔
So here, in the context of the arising of mindfulness, one of the conditions listed is, seeking, relying upon a spiritual mentor. And this is a very important point. For example, even in the conventional context of, say, education, we are all aware that to a large extent, how well educated the children will be, students will be, is really determined by the quality of the education of the teacher who is teaching in that environment. And similarly, when it comes to the conduct of the students in the school, again, if the teacher in that school behaves in a very proper way, in a responsible way, and in a compassionate manner, and also with a degree of sense of humility, these qualities will kind of rub on to the children, to the students, and also students will reflect those qualities of the teacher as well. So we know that how important the role of teacher is in the education context. If that is so, here we are talking about a context where the teacher being sought is a teacher who is capable of showing us the path to liberation and path to full enlightenment. So therefore, the qualities that we should seek in the teacher should also be in consonant with that purpose for what we are seeking to rely on that teacher. And because of this, Buddha himself has spoke about the specific qualifications that are necessary on the part of the teacher, starting from seeking an abbot in a monastic disciplinary context, up to the Vajra master in a highest Vajrayana tradition. So Buddha has spoken about specific qualifications that are necessary on the part of the teacher whom we wish to rely upon to show us the path. And to summarize, the most important qualities can be summed up in two qualifications. One is the kind of the familiarity and mastery of the Buddha's scriptures. So in other words, having a scriptural knowledge. And the other one is having realization of the knowledge of the scriptures. So these two are the most important qualifications, and they embody all the other qualifications. So in other words, we can refer to this quality as quality of learning and quality of meditative practice. So when it comes to the quality of learning, as I mentioned yesterday, since we are talking about a spiritual context in Buddhism, in the context of Buddhism, which require the maximum use of human intelligence, so therefore it is necessary on the part of the teacher who is showing the path to have a vast mastery of the knowledge of the scriptures. And however, the intellectual understanding of the scripture alone is not adequate. On the basis of that knowledge, that individual must have critically reflected upon the meaning of the scriptures, so that one has a deeper understanding of that. And based upon that, the same person also must have a realization and experience of the actual facts or instructions that he or she is imparting onto the students. Now, in order to have that experience, one needs to practice oneself. That realization and experience simply wouldn't come on the basis of knowledge alone. Therefore, the qualification of meditative experience becomes very crucial. So in short, these two qualifications, the qualifications of scriptural knowledge and qualification of realization, really are important.
Yeah. Some question. Oh, good then. Some question, Chana. I forget about question.
Is there an inconsistency between Shantideva and Kamalashila regarding the areas of study and knowledge a Bodhisattva should pursue?
Kasa.
Kamalashila dan di Shivalanyi Parulia ani Chanju Sembe ani Jangbe shi Karal Jangu Yuma Yokolia, Yachijung Kolia, ani Sheva Mitim Yorves.
Yachiwe Kole.
Yachijung Tola. Chanju Sembe Jango Sak Shirwa. Delia Yachijung Tolia. Shantideva indicates a bodhisattva should be educated in many fields of knowledge. Kamalashila seems to say it should be limited. Where? So this was Lao.
Your way. Oh, take us a low. Chumabula Mijos. Take up the Kasagan de Joimba. The logo is added that the Logomarson you get to the Maris and go to Quasharis.
So actually, we did touch briefly upon this question yesterday when we read the section where Kamalashila says that don't cultivate knowledge in many other fields, but just one dharma, and that dharma is compassion.
가만히서 그런 거 숨어있단 말이다. 더 롱창을
This
제주
is
선배 좀 올라가 미자스.
So this is in fact a citation from a sutra which Kamalashila is quoting, not his own words, but still we discussed that
근데
point
좀 전에
yesterday.
그런 숨을 보다. 좀 올라가 지금 좀 올라가 미자스. 인실로 숨을. 그런 숨이 숨도 봐. 좀 전에 그런 숨도 봐. 뭔가 싶지.
So for example, so this is a citation from the Buddha, and on the surface, the quotation states that the Bodhisattva should not train in many dharmas, but only in one, and that one dharma is compassion. But at the same time, the Buddha himself has taught so many dharmas.
Did matter logically, Kamalashil's own sort of writing, the commentary about the Shatarakshita's logic, very complicated, very difficult to understand, and very thick. I think, at least I think, because it's 800 pages, no less like that. So we can see these masters are great logicians, very, very knowledgeable. So therefore, Kamalashila
So therefore, Kamalashila would never say that you don't need to study many fields.
and the shamli yare and the gumung shude and the namjin trouble comje bachigo degrees. Yang chum den the lungden de changje, right? Kasa, jinsol love, dugi lasso sasul yorda. The Kamalashila did the shaking, could chum den the combated sooner. Remember, Lobson Chowari, Sassoon. Children Namji, Shiruk, Tobe, Javachari, Kashamushari, sooner.
So in fact, similar discussions will appear in the latter part of the Kamalashila's text, where a question has been raised that the opinion that in order to attain omniscient state of Buddhahood, single-pointed meditation alone is adequate. So Kamalashila, and then so this is an opinion that has been presented with plausible support from citations from the sutra, where Buddha states that one should not engage in the activity of giving and so on. So then Kamalashila explains that many of these statements are really very contextual, relevant only to a very specific context, and he in fact establishes the fact that at the heart of the Buddhist meditation and the path to enlightenment lies the application of the faculty of intelligence and application of the wisdom of discriminating awareness. So this comes later on. What is the quickest way to enlightenment?
Now there are real differences between these two texts. The Shantadeva emphasizes the practice of Bodhicitta through the Dakshinyam society.
Through equalizing and exchanging of self and others.
There is some differences. That does not mean the Pekhaga Kishmari, it's Hande, someone.
So still, that does not mean they are totally incompatible. The essential points of one practice is included in the other.
Then another field where real differences is Kamalashila, the holder of some kind of Rungshiyava.
Kamalashila adheres to some notion of, some acceptance of inherent existence, intrinsic existence of things.
And
he also follows, to some extent, the mind-only school's understanding of rejection of the reality of the external physical world and affirmation of the non-duality of subject and object. On the other hand, Shantideva adheres to a standpoint that rejects the notion of intrinsic existence, even on the conventional level. Yet he accepts. So yet he does accord a degree of reality to the physical world of matter, because since the existence of things is understood only on the nominal level, so then there is known just as the internal world of experience can be said to exist, the external world of matter can also be said to exist at that nominal level, on that nominal level.
That is the real differences.
What is the smallest limit of sentient life? Are single cells, simple multi-cell? No. And what is the quickest way to enlightenment? What is the quickest way to enlightenment?
Lay down, nothing but think. 지즈멜을 듣소요다. 지즈멜에 그 투적 디시르지 난체. 미슈고다 니중집나는 셜로가 필요잖아요. 라마식 차요래. 라마되기 니 셜이사 서우여서 님kom나 님상자. 차양kom나 차양상자. 간데 레두제인의 kom미고 상제가 레신 송 라마되기. 이 지즈멜에 양에 들 툴러니 라라고 싶총. 스타트업니 라라고 싶다죠. 땅을 패줘 간데 레두제인 타죠. 심쇼래. इन सनी दी लामे जो तो खरी जो ना खगे मजुन सो रे और ता जने छोरा ने लाख या लोमा दे मिंदुस ता मारबेसा जो सो रे.
This reminds me of an incident from Milarepa's life. Milarepa, in his early part of the life, resorted to the use of black magic and cast spells and created hailstorms and so on. And then later, as a result of experiencing deep sense of disenchantment with the samsaric existence, he sought a real spiritual teachings. So he came across a master who told him that this master has a very special instruction, and the instruction is so powerful that if you meditate during the daytime, you will become enlightened during the daytime, and if you meditate during the nighttime, you will become enlightened, during the nighttime. And even if, for some who are karmically ripened, this is an instruction that would, bring enlightenment, even without having to do any meditation. So Milarepa felt that, when I learned the black magic skills, rituals, I was able to master them quite fast. So it seems maybe I'm the one who's karmically, ready for this. So he, without meditating, he went to bed and slept. And next morning, he met the Lama, and the Lama asked him, so what kind of realization did you get? Milarepa said, nothing. So he said, no realizations at all, nothing. So then the master said, well, it seems I don't have the karma to bring enlightenment to you, so that you should now go to Marpa Lozawa.
Then, Marpa Lozawa really has to teach him very practical way. Through a lot of hardship like that. I think one difference, those case, the Lama or teacher, very experienced, and the student also very, very devoted, then without so much study, just essence, teach with few words. Then the devotees immediately practice or meditate on it, months. Then actual experience develop, then next sort of instruction give. That's one way. Because the reliable Lama, they are And then they actual experience, till actual experience develop, not go further, go like that. So then that is the one way, Chikta and the Dire, Kasore, Chisarana. Kansakwazen, that was a chido.
So this is the procedure by which students are led by the master according to an approach that is very specific to the individual.
But then looks Marpa, not that much study, knows what's the
Marpa is not known to be a highly learned scholar.
But great translator. And his teacher, Naropa, great scholar. So obviously, the essence of teaching Marpa received from Naropa is that there were Nalende and Kabazu Shungi, Nimbusu Duni, Tamjo almost all the margin you show is Lebanon, that Nimbudian soon go out. Sandra.
So when Marpa received teachings from his own teacher, Naropa, who was a great scholar from the Nalanda monastery, then the master, Naropa, was such that he was able to distill the essence of entire teachings of the Buddha, just as Shantideva points out in his text, like extracting butter out of milk, and then is able to present the teachings in such a way that it is in a distilled form. How did those awful afflictions get into my mind in the first place? So then the question is, we talked about the beginninglessness of the continuum of consciousness and the afflictions that accompany our consciousness also has a beginningless dimension. And then the question is, why is it like this? Then we can only say, well, that's nature, that's reality. So for example, if we ask the question, why is it that the conditioned phenomena, such as mental phenomena and material phenomena, they have this nature of dependence upon their causes and conditions? Why is that so? We can only say that's the way it is.
Shiva Sukjin Benda, or a series of Yongzam Yimati Kareslam, Chinirwa. Sukjin China, Kokopatamil Pea, Kopatamil, Koji, Dachit Pea, Tamil Dachit Pea, Yamar, or Sukjin China, Jidan Shanata. Shiva di Koroten. Charge, 10 temperature, or more charge means than it, they should pay twice to one.
So, similarly, as to the question, why is it that mental phenomena has characteristics that are very different from material phenomena? Because the mental phenomena is, first of all, in the nature of mere experience. It has this quality of knowing and awareness. Again, unlike material objects, again, that is part of the nature. That's the way it is. And given this difference between the essential nature of matter and mind, we can also see the differences in the implications of this. For example, whatever it is, so long as it's the physical characteristics, its potential for development is limited. It cannot reach an infinite point. Whereas if it is a mental quality, given the basis of this continuum of consciousness, the qualities of the mind, if one cultivates them, they have the potential for limitless development. Again, that's because of the difference in the essential nature of the two phenomena.
자상을 리버시 제세.
So therefore, in the Buddhist teachings, one speak of understanding the nature of reality by means of taking into account the four principles, the principles of nature and so on.
Yeah.
Could Your Holiness please explain what deities there are in Tibetan understanding, and also, for example, what about the protesters? What are the protesters outside protesting about?
What was that? Deity.
Is there anything to do with the religious freedom?
What was it?
지단 당부도 베베 낭쇼 나리아 하다마르 주고래.
Yes, deity. In the Pali tradition, of course, it also, I think, mentioned that Hadal Hamai in the Tisasarande, Pajigare.
So in the Pali tradition, there are references to devas, celestial beings, and also asuras, demigods, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And then Sanskrit tradition, when Buddha give teaching, they already some deity form bodhisattvas, like Manjushri, Avalokiteshvara, Bhadrabani, Samanthabhadra, Maitreya, so on. You see, these deity form. So at that time, I think the ordinary people may not see these bodhisattvas. Only those people who have a certain sort of mental or spiritual qualities. Then among these deity bodhisattvas, there are two types. One, I think, truly deity bodhisattvas. Some appears as a deity bodhisattvas, but actually manifestation of Buddha's own different qualities. Like Manjushri, manifestation of Buddha's karuna, Manjushri, manifestation of Buddha's wisdom, so on. Now, very purpose of the different manifestation of Buddha's different quality, now there's a certain sort of the purpose. The follower of Buddha Dharma, if he or she have certain sort of the ability, then they visualize these different deities. There is some particular sort of purpose. Like that. So there's the then I think before initiation, our initiation, I will touch the system of the Tantrayana or deity yoga, visualization of oneself as a deity. That's sort of the system I will explain. I think day after tomorrow. So now with that, again, I think then in Tibet, although in India also in the Sudra the Sungdoga, Chumugange Hamu, that's Jigdember Vada. The Yungdoga, Jigdembe, deity in the Yungdoga.
So even in India, actually, we find references to mundane gods. In the sutras, for example, there's a reference to the goddess of river Ganges.
And also Brahma, like that. And Ishvara, Tejinwa.
Indra.
Indra, yes, like that. So in Tibet also, the local deities, among the local deities, some are Buddhist, some are non-Buddhist. I think before Buddhism reached Tibet, the Buddhism, their tradition, worship spirit. So at the time of Pema in Tibet, in Samye Monastery, of course, he take the main responsibility to eliminate obstacle of Buddha Dharma. I think Shankar Rishida, I think coming 2 times, Lhasa. I think first time, he tried to preach, but then not successful. So then wait till Pema come. So like that, these are stories. So during his time, Pema then I think there is some certain, purpose. You see, he asked, although he knows, he must knows all this sort of the fact, but you see, they tried, so that 내장면 합헌 any pug 유리시 doesn't already 지 any temple panto content pamado content 끝나는 정도가 도시는 다 합해야 충분히.
So it was during Padmasambhava's time the practice of consulting mediums evolved, and the story is that he had a medium go into trance, and on that asked the medium to explain among the various spirits that are local to the Tibetan region, which ones are more conducive and constructive, and which ones are more harmful and less conducive.
So then eventually, although I think in ancient time, in that part of the world, now still today, in Muslim community in Afghanistan or Pakistan side also, I think some thapiatuwa.
So there are medium practices even in these areas to this day.
So there's the background. Now the problem. This particular sort of spirit called Shungden, now it started during 5th Dalai Lama. So now over 370 years. So since since 5th Dalai Lama, almost I think 300 years is this deity, this spirit, always remain very, very controversial. Only last 70 years, after 13th Dalai Lama's death, then this little bit
became more prominent. Became more prominent.
In some area, in Lhasa area. That also, I think, almost like reaction of 13th Dalai Lama's restriction. Like that. So, in any way, since 51 till early 70, I myself also sincere worshipper of this spirit. I made great mistake with Dalai Lama's name, to worship this, due to my junior tutor, like that. So eventually, I noticed this is something wrong. And as a result of reading autobiography of 5th Dalai Lama, and then many reliable, well-known Gelugpa masters' biography, then become clear. This is wrong. This is evil spirit. So 5th Dalai Lama, that is what Malam Lobe Tamsin Jumbo, then the Dwala Sawachigan Sachi.
In fact, fifth Dalai Lama very clearly wrote and identified this spirit to be a spirit that has arisen on the basis of a distorted aspiration, and its nature is that of destructive, and its consequence is also harmful to the Buddha Dharma and sentient beings in general.
So then, so therefore, eventually I noticed that. Then I dropped my practice. Then eventually make known to those monasteries or those scholars or monks like that. So then also, they also then fully convinced, because there is sufficient
Basis.
Reasons or facts there. And 13th Dalai Lama also put restriction. So then another sort of reason I feel, number one, Tibetan Buddhism, Nalanda tradition, such a profound tradition, due to some Tibetan sort of, now not only this deity, but also is a different sort of spirit. Is it Tibetan? Sometimes too much emphasis the importance of these spirit rather than Buddha or Nagarjuna. That's a disgrace. So there is real danger that such profound Nalanda tradition eventually degenerate, become something spirit worshipper. It is pity. Number one. Of course, we can offer those local spirit. Something like we ask to someone, please,
Do this and do that.
Please do some help like that. That's okay. But worship was something very important. It is totally a mistake.
In fact, the 13th Dalai Lama has stated that if someone... So 13th Dalai Lama has actually made this statement to Gyabche Phamukar Rinpoche very clearly that if someone worships Shukden with such devotion, there is a danger that it could conflict with one's precepts of taking refuge in the three jewels.
So that's one factor, one reason. Then the second reason, I think part of first reason. So I usually in India and also in Ladakh and these different monasteries, so I usually telling people, now I think too much. I don't go into detail now. All right. And anyway, the second reason is, as you know, I fully committed about non-sectarian principle. As fifth Dalai Lama and the second Dalai Lama, first Dalai Lama, third Dalai Lama, all these previous masters, previous Dalai Lamas, as well as many great masters from all sects, Gelu, Nyingma, Goju, Satya, Chanang, and many sects. Many great masters, well-known master, following according to the non-sectarian principle. So, worshipper of this spirit, they are very sectarian. Even when I worship using this spirit, one day, some my dream, one my close friend, Kishi Raptenla, in my dream, there's one Nyingma text in my room, in my dream. one person used to come in my room and take away that text. So next day I mentioned that dream to Geshe-Rabde. Oh, Geshe-Rabde immediately react. Oh, this is the Shungden. The Nyingma text in Dalai Lama's room is not good. So should remove. He mentioned like that. And then also that's one thing. So therefore, I fully committed promotion of non-sectarian principle. So therefore, this Shungden spirit, there are sort of reliable stories, stories mentioned according my junior tutors sort of verbal
Accounts.
vocal account. It mentioned some of the Gelugpa Lama as well as Tibetan government high official who practiced Nyingma tradition. Because of that, this deity destroyed, killed. It recorded about 13 cases mentioned in that story. So very sectarian. So therefore, these two reasons. Then third, because the fifth Dalai Lama consider is this evil spirit. Then I have the name of 14th Dalai Lama. So therefore, I have to follow the principle of previous Dalai Lamas, 5th Dalai Lama and 13th Dalai Lama. So I'm trying to follow. This is their sort of
example.
Ah.
Their example.
Ah.
Their example. No.
Their example. Then the last part was religious freedom.
Freedom. To the Deva Yorubes.
Ah.
To the Deva Chagi Yorubes.
Now here, firstly, spirit worship is not, I think, genuine religious practice. Certainly, this is not genuine Buddhist sort of religion. So, but this is just aside that, beside the
question.
Now, my own sort of story. In early or in late 60s, as I mentioned yesterday or this morning, 67 I received teaching, Shantadeva's book, from late Kun Lama Rinpoche. Then many other teachings received from him, very rare teaching, which not available with my tutor. So I received teaching from him. Then later, I developed one desire to receive some text according Nyingma tradition. So I asked Lingam Rinpoche, my senior tutor, I have that kind of desire to receive one important Gyusawa Nyingbo, one important sort of Nyingma text that I very much want to receive oral transmission from late Kun Lama Rinpoche.
Guhya Garba Tantra, no? Guhya Garba.
Kun Lama Rinpoche. Then although Lingam Rinpoche himself is very, very cautious about this spirit. But meantime, he also, hurts, if Gelugpa Lama, they touch Nyingma tradition, then this spirit will harm. So Lingam Rinpoche a little cautious. So then advised me, be cautious. Not good to receive Nyingma tradition from him. Although I already received many texts, many teaching from him already, but this particular Nyingma sort of text, Lingam Rinpoche very, very cautious. So then I stopped. So religious freedom.
So at that time, it seems that I did not get my own religious freedom.
Because fear. Because exaggerated fear say, I lost genuine religious freedom. After I dropped this practice, then I got the freedom. Received teaching from Nyingma tradition, from Sajja tradition, from Kogyu tradition, from various sort of reliable Lama. I received teaching. Now, I think I can say, with little pride, I think I have some knowledge, all these traditions. So it is very useful. Another sort of sad story. In late 60s, one time, one old Kunu monk, I think age around, I still remember his face, age I think 70, 80, like 60 or 70 like that. Physical also quite small. And he came to see me and he asked me some teaching of Nyingma tradition. Then I have no sort of knowledge about that teaching. Then I asked him, now, that subject I don't know. Please go to Varanasi or Buddhagaya, where Kunu Lama Rinpoche, then still alive. So approach Kunu Lama Rinpoche and ask him. I have no that teaching. So later I found, oh, I am Buddhist. Suppose they, dollar pamper channel, lamshin yi didn't know Zavakang said. Dollar pamper channel, lamshin yi, Nendigi lam shivaja, Ransangi lam shivaja, Jerusalem lam shivaja. Shiva chene, the dark lamji chawayan chala sumduan.
For example, the Buddha states in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra that the Bodhisattvas should cultivate the knowledge of all the parts of the disciples, parts of the self-enlightened ones, and parts of the Bodhisattvas, so that the Bodhisattvas may be able to fulfill the needs of all people who aspire for teachings that are appropriate to their own mental faculties.
So at that time, I really felt very sad. Now I failed to fulfill the wishes of that poor monk. Still I feel like that. So, now today, suppose that person is come, then I proudly to explain. So then also past the Tibetan history, unnecessary conflict in the name of religion also happened, frankly speaking. Sometimes we call sarma.
So sometimes when two monasteries clash with each other, it's referred to as the Yellow War.
Very sad. Really sad. You see, sometimes then actually after 13th Dalai Lama passed away, due to this deity, this spirit, some small Nyingma monastery or temple, in some cases, actually destroyed because of the sectarian sort of conflict. These things I later come to understand.
Came to know.
Came to know. So therefore, religious freedom, sectarian change, religious freedom, mayungiti, kangwa chadi, religious freedom, gyobara.
So in fact, restricting a form of practice that deprives others of their religious freedom is in fact a protection of religious freedom. So, in other words, a negation of a negation is an affirmation.
Like that. So, okay. So now some of the accusation, including Chinese officials, also accuse me that Dalai Lama not sort of violated religious freedom because of the Shungden sort of worship. Now Chinese officially accuse me like that. So therefore, they use the word ban. I never use that. I am fully committed about freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So, right from the beginning, I made it very clear. It is my moral responsibility, make clear what is wrong, what is right. But whether listen or not, up to them, up to the individual. I have no power to impose. So I'm happy these people enjoy their freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Very good. So the other day in Germany, my recent visit, again you see their group, you see come and shouting. So I heard, you see, their voice, particularly one lady's, I think one nun maybe. So quite strong. So I think at least 3-4 hours shouting. Then I got the real sort of worry. Oh, her throat may suffer. So, okay, like that. Yeah. Next question. Yeah.
Your Holiness, I have found that over the years, I struggle with having a job, career, even though it is... Lagalong.
Ramasus.
I struggle with having a job, even though it is in the healthcare.
Correct. Even though?
Even though it is in the healthcare.
Healthcare.
No. I really just want to study Dharma and learn Tibetan. How should we all best balance Dharma study and career?
Oh, I think study Tibetan, I think waste of time. Now, English translation or material in English language now quite available. So read this and study. Whenever you have weekend, instead of go nightclub or like that, you see, read, study, and contemplation.
Contemplate. No.
And then your work, healthcare. It itself, the Bodhisattva's work, the action, act of compassion, is wonderful. I always telling those people who actually sort of serving physically other needy people, and I really sort of admire. And I always telling them, you are actually implementation of compassion. My compassion is just a word. Bala 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 bala. So please carry your work as a health service. Wonderful. And then whenever you found time, read these books and think more. Then at the time of your retirement, then you get more time. So at that time, you already acquired sufficient knowledge. Then you can meditate. Isn't it? Like that.
This is a question about Tibet. I have just returned from a trip to Gyatang, Tibetan area in Yunnan province, I think, where the local Tibetan population is about 30,000. The local
30,000.
30,000, and the People's Liberation Army numbers about 20,000. And together with the armed policemen, the ratio is almost becoming 1-to-1. Therefore, it has become a prison in a sense.
Prison?
Now, under such circumstance, do you still have enough confidence to continue your middle way approach, to seek the solution to the problem through dialogue with the communist government?
If I state, you see, that fact, then I think I get immediately scolded from Chinese government. So now you, as a foreigner, and actually visited this area, make known more people that reality. I think since you visited that area, and particularly since you asked me this sort of
Question. This question.
this question, so now you have moral responsibility to do something. Then, as far as my approach in order to achieve mutually agreeable solution between Chinese government and us, of course, we are here right from the beginning. Consider ourselves as a free spokesman for Tibetan people. I never consider I'm ruler of Tibet. I simply acting like a free spokesman for Tibetan people. Inside Tibet, people are there, but they have no opportunity to express their deep feeling. If their feeling expressed, then they got the name of reactionary or anti-government or anti-party. So naturally, those people who are in free country have the moral responsibility to speak on behalf of them. So, since 1979, we try our best to reach out to the Chinese Communist government. But then, 1993, it ceased, this contract. Then, 2002, renewed direct contact. At the beginning, we are quite hopeful. And we put all our faith and trust. In spite, we have sort of some knowledge about the totalitarian sort of thinking. But we put all our trust and hope. Now it seems difficult. So, I don't know. My position is already semi-retired position. Since 2001, we already have elected political leadership. So since my position is semi-retired position. So the final decision is not in my hand, but in his hand. So we have to discuss with these people. Since I left, some Chinese officials or say official statement, some happened. So we have to discuss. I have no definite sort of idea. Now, one thing, as soon as my representative returned, their immediate expression is great disappointment. So, things difficult. Meantime, inside Tibet, as you witnessed, the local authority now using force. And now, according information, every bigger Tibetan village, the construction of military barrack now going on. So that means permanent sort of station of forces or soldier. So these are, let's say, the indication. Now things are going to be very difficult. Now, meantime, our faith, our trust towards Chinese people, as a people, we're full of trust. Chinese, cultured people, practical people, hardworking people. So we have full faith towards Chinese people. So therefore, in spite difficult reach out with the totalitarian sort of regime, I think people, still people. So it is very, very important to reach out with Chinese people. But recently, after 10th March, wherever I go, some Chinese demonstrations also follow. Except this time, in America, only Shungden group, no Chinese demonstrator. So that seems to see, now at least you see, those Chinese get more clear picture. We are not anti-Chinese. We are not against the Olympic game. Very clear. So therefore, this time, no Chinese demonstrators, and furthermore, I met some Chinese intellectuals, some young, some old. They express really moving sort of expression. So these are the sign of hope. Take time. So here, including this question, please make effort so to bring closer understanding with Chinese public. That's very, very important. So now, it seems now, only hope is the public, Chinese people. Now here, the heavy censorship is the greatest obstacle. And distorted information, greatest obstacle. These two things, we have to address is to reduce these things. So our American friends here, and also some Chinese, you can help much. Thank you. Yes. Oh, one thing I want to say. The last year I met small group, Tibetan, young Tibetan, and young Chinese in Ottawa, in Canada. I met. So I'm very much pleased. They already formed some friendship group, Chinese and Tibetan. So I give every encouragement, and then I told them, your spirit must spread in some other places. So then, after 10th March, one occasion, because I decided to
No.
go.
Mayo Clinic is there.
Mayo Clinic. There are some Chinese demonstrations as they come, and then finally, I express, I want to see some of them. Then I think 7 young Chinese boys and girls will come. And two, really using common sense and listen my explanation and really showing human response. The rest, 5, not using human,
Common sense.
Human common sense, just too much emotion, not listen my explanation, just showing too much emotion like that. So, between us, there's a big table. Otherwise, there is, looks real, the possibility of physical exchange. Of course, American bodyguard, these also is in there. Otherwise, you see, looks very, very tense, very tense. So I really developed the sense of sort of real concern and pity. One-sided information. Their patriotism is good. But nationalism, in certain level, or with truth, with reason, is very good. But extreme nationalism, very narrow-minded nationalism, is dangerous, isn't it? Like that. So like that. So at that time I mentioned, now time has come to set friendship group, Tibetan, Chinese, wherever they live, and make constant contact. Then some difficult situation happen, then they can discuss. So there are many Tibetans also here, and our friends also there, also here. So please help to set up some friendship group, then so that through personal contact they get a clearer picture of our problem. And Tibetan side also, I think important to know the Chinese sort of the sensitive feeling. That also important, like that. Good. Now text. 다 드네마 전이 걸려서. 나 디 너주 뭐고 무슨 없이. 무슨 말? 숨주르셔. 숨줄 수 없이. 숨줄 수 없이 리시 당분 된데선 되니 견세 시에네. 다 셔서네마. 다 룽어 가르래. 미룽어 그래. 다 디디 템베. 그냥 디디 시에베체. 이니 템베 심체. 이니 시신이 잘하체네. 다 드라이거. 두베거. 녀거. 사회거. 다 계속 저는 강급거리네. 다 tension된 거래. 다 들으셔.
So we will read from the text from verse 34 onwards, which is on page 51, where we read, "First I should always establish this mind in such a manner, and I should always remain still as if without sense faculties, like a piece of wood." So from this point onwards, Shantideva is explaining the practice of how to guard the introspective awareness. And here, first of all, it is important to cultivate the understanding of what is an appropriate behavior, what is an inappropriate behavior. And, on the basis of that understanding, this knowledge and evaluations must be then held within one's mindfulness, and so that one can apply this mindfulness in one's day-to-day life and everyday conduct, whether it is when you are walking about, or whether it is when you are eating, or whether you are lying, or whether you are sleeping, or whether you are... So in all of these situations, Shantideva is pointing out the need to constantly apply awareness, introspective awareness.
This also indicates practice as a practitioner, 24 hours practice. There are also, even when, what do you call, chimayuk.
Even when spitting.
And
also cleaning your nose, blowing your nose.
and also in toilet. You see, every occasion there is sort of a certain way of practice. So that means whole 24 hours is practice. So
So in this way, hardly a distinction will be found between the actual formal sitting meditation practice and the post-meditation occasions as well.
So important is, as I mentioned this morning, as soon as you wake up, make some kind of determination. Rest of the whole day and night, I should be a genuine practitioner. And particularly in this case, you see, I always remember about Bodhisattva, altruism, and all my conduct should be according that way, like that. That's the case. That's the case. Ngurungani, Margurungabje, Ngurungabje, Ngurungabje. Ring Shiglan Tevecho, Toba Yang Yang Samne, Sentita would Rilda, Rubdomio Sumarcha. That Yamudi think it, think it, Jenny, yeah, two, that Tawatoba, that thing a ton of the Bacha, Sabe, in the Tamcha shower.
So in stanza 58, which is on page 53, we read the following: remembering over and over again that after a long time, the best of moments of human existence, of leisure, has been obtained, I will keep this mind unshakable, like Mount Meru. So what Shantideva is explaining, is that one needs to constantly apply mindfulness and introspective awareness in one's own everyday, day-to-day life conducts, and occasionally, every now and then, one needs to also reaffirm the commitment, determination to make one's human existence of leisure and opportunity purposeful and meaningful.
Maranzo Yanchik Kasuri because Shanjaro Kia Chikdi, Ludikan Yunduataku, saw Nobuchorataku. So the day that Lulu touches the Shanjachia, that the Nunduaya Sungiari.
And then from stanza 59, Shantideva is explaining the practices and thought processes that are aimed at decreasing our over-attachment and clinging to our body, because the sensations we experience at the level of body tend to be very acute and immediate, and we often tend to feel overly attached and crave for these experiences. So in these verses, reading from 59, where we read, one does not object when the body is being dragged here and there by vultures coveting its flesh, then why do so now? So here Shantideva is explaining thought processes that would help us release ourselves from this excessive attachment and clinging to our body.
That didn't do Tamba. Dodo on dance on to Lula tree, Mari, Lula tree, Loshati, Semjan Namdun Tribichi, Ishinkin, Lusus.
Then in stanza 70, we read, consider the body as a ship, because it is the basis of coming and going. Set the body in motion at your will in order to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. And in the Tibetan text it reads, I shall transform my body into a wish-granting jewel.
대단한 얘기 다도 준비 신도지 있으다. 간다지 개인기 지다 봐 상황도没动. 간다 로 개회 초선도다. 로 장주고 승부 차련도다. 디 전신 대표단 랑화역 전에 그다. 대단한 얘기지 다도 준비 신도지 야도 와. 그러니 선제연에 선제면서 주도 되잖아. Hypocrisy.
So, and then when we read in stanza 71, one who has become self-confident or self-controlled in that manner should always have a smiling face. So here, Shantidev was explaining that as a result of such application of mindfulness and introspective awareness, one will be able to ensure that your mind is always more inclined towards the virtuous mental states, and particularly those mental states that enhance and contribute to upholding the awakening mind. And so that you have a degree of control over your mind so that you can kind of align it, turn it, direct it more towards those mental states, leaning towards bodhicitta. So when you have that kind of control over your mind, then he says that as a reflection, you can assume a smiling demeanor and face. So this is very different from an individual who maintains a kind of a hypocritical pose where although internally one might be fraught with worries and anxieties and so on, but putting on a nice smile on the face. But that is a total hypocrisy. But here, Shantidev was explaining that this kind of smiling face can arise naturally.
So of course, now these are simply reflection of inner peace. Wonderful. Now, Chonyung Musum Yong Tondi, Droye Shetan, Somburki, Senja Kunji, Zashi, Gishi, Kunji Chobuchi, Benjudwa.
So then he writes, one should give up frowning and grimacing, be the first to greet, and be a friend, and a friend to the world. So in other words, when you have that kind of quality, then you truly become friend to all beings, and you will be someone that dear to others, someone who is truly a friend, a spiritual mentor. So wouldn't that be wonderful?
Somburkis.
And it says that one should be sincere and truthful.
So that is the basis of trust. Nothing to hide. And always frank, straightforward. And through that way, genuine trust can develop. Trust is the basis of friendship. I think whole human society or international relations, I think trust is very, very important. Even in the health work, like I think between nurses and patient and doctor, trust is very essential. My own experience, sometimes the doctor may be very, very qualified doctor and with huge mission, but the doctor not showing, in some cases, not showing human feeling, just a profession. The handling like article. Right.
Fixing a machine. Like fixing a machine.
Oh. And with sophisticated big machine. Then sometimes feel, maybe this doctor, some kind of experiment on me or something like that. Sometimes it happens like that. But then those doctors who really showing you human feeling, genuine sense of concern, then you feel very relaxed. So trust really makes differences, isn't it? So like that. So medicine, I think if the prescription of medicine, if you little suspicion with doctor, then I think take that medicine and then throw in your toilet. So sometimes the doctor carries the medicine and some water, one glass of water, so immediately to swallow.
Make you swallow. Yeah.
So, 전일 무슨 영통인데 러시아도 송불지.
So, yeah, we read that. So, letting go of such expressions as frowning and grimace, and putting on kind of a demeanor of smiling face, one should be a friend to all and also be sincere and truthful.
칠로 쏘고 나도만다 양 지거리 되겠다. 전시된다 송샤인 개비도다.
So from stanza 72 onwards, again, Shantideva goes on about the need to apply mindfulness and awareness in the context of other behavior. So let us read stanza 80.
미기 심전 따나양 니다니를 때내다 상제뉴도 누르시 장시 참배 주기 따스.
So here we read, one should always look straight at sentient beings as if drinking them in with the eyes, thinking, relying upon them alone, I shall attain Buddhahood. Dependence upon them alone, I shall attain Buddhahood.
다데 디저는데 결주 교수인데 83 진배 파를 친러서 공내 공도 계수제 춤물체도 치매도 소시 현재团상모 다양 차신 시대 찍으셔시려 말이스 야자 장고래스 아니 개치 좀 시어버래스
So in stanza 83,
이네 개치슈도 시행을 해봐주고 그랬어.
stanza 83, Shantideva writes the following: the perfections of generosity and so forth are progressively more and more lofty. One should not forsake a better one for the sake of a lesser, unless it is in accordance with the bridge of the Bodhisattva's way of life. So what Shantideva is pointing out here is that it is important to, simply not remain complacent with whatever practices that you are doing normally, but rather one should try to make strides and progress on the path. And furthermore, another important factor is to remember that one should be able to judge between what is more important and what practices would bring greater benefit to other sentient beings, and always keeping in mind the maximum benefit of the other sentient beings.
나야, 다디 쇼다가 제대로 리시 현존라 다도 좀을 내버려. 진짜지 인도산에 아니 투증하고 링스에 까보는 게 잘 나왔어. 다소 300원 개. 류마가 접어서 뭐로 300원 여배 인도산에 삼바 전주고 심보다 소 샴페인 코나 푸 샴페인 코나 다쳐서는 삼단 대비이나 투증하고 링스에 베이스 좀 되는데 투증하고 되게 타 링비네스 다쳐서는 시기가 인도산에 쏟아게 잡아걸로 가셔버도 돼야지 샴페인도 줄고요나 제주선벌 나와요.
So then we read in stanza 84, realizing this, one should always strive for the benefit of others. Even that which is prohibited has been permitted for the compassionate one who foresees benefit. So this is a reference to the Bodhisattva practitioners for whom the implementation of the ideal of bodhicitta is the most important thing. And furthermore, bringing about others' welfare is their ultimate aim, and therefore, for someone who is dedicated in that manner, for those practitioners, the Buddha, the fully enlightened Buddha, who sees into a long future, have even made permissible or allowed certain
long future, the wider interest,
and who's able to see long future and wider interest of the beings involved. The Buddhas have given permission to these bodhisattvas with respect to certain norms that may have been prohibited in certain context of morality. But in the context here, if these actions contribute towards bringing about benefit for others, these have been permitted.
반은 소다랑 나차셔는 제제 묵구스. 지 가셔 지 양식고 낭셔. 양 가셔 칭하게 저래 송샤. 그 circumstance 유리잖아요. 그 내주할 때는 로고.
So even in the Vinaya ethics itself, the monastic ethics, disciplinary ethics itself, we also see the Buddha's awareness of the need to be sensitive to the individual context and the need to adapt according to circumstances. For example, there might be certain precepts that may have been certain actions, that conducts that may have been previously prohibited, but then later reviewed and re-permitted. And then there are certain, conducts that not only were prohibited at the beginning, but also later on through a further review, that prohibition has been reconfirmed. And then certain actions that may have been permitted before, but then later, due to some other circumstances, have been prohibited. So even in the Vinaya monastic disciplinary ethics, there is this the flexibility that is allowed. There is this importance of taking into account the different contexts.
다드네 다디샤나마 직다 도자사다. 괜히 취셔다 디중샤.
Then in the subsequent stanzas, Shantideva talks about the appropriate manner in which one should engage in the conduct of eating and what kind of behavior one should adopt when giving teachings and so on.
다또 르중 순거다 이리. 쳇저 뒤지디 타가로 순서디 르중 와도 전.
So of course, the kind of the direct audience to whom he's presenting these instructions is really the monastic members of the monastic order. For example, there is a stanza where he talks about where one should give everything, all the possessions, except for the 3 sets of robes. So we will now read from stanza 90. So here we read in stanza 90, one should not expose a vessel of the vast Dharma to an inferior Dharma. Putting aside the Bodhisattva's way of life, one should not reduce them with sutras and mantras. So the point Shantideva is making is that when teaching, if the student is someone who has the potential for understanding greater Dharma teachings, then these students should not be just confined only to a limited scope. And for example, and also the reference to being not seduced by sutras and mantras may be to, for example, in Tibet, there are monasteries, some of which are just ritual monasteries, where other than learning the rituals, they do not do any actual study of the meaning of these texts and so on. So if there is a monastic member who has the potential to really study the sutras properly and understand their meaning, but rather if they are diverted to only doing the rituals and memorization, only the rituals, then that is a kind of seducing them with sutras and mantras, which this is what Shantideva is talking about. And then we read the stanza 100.
계산남기 밀어봐 되는 강야 유명인데 대장내배 개발로 쏘는 민주 강야매 또 지지 현도도 뭐잖아 지지 교사 자소
So
다 뒤수고대 무슨 양나 규정으로 선전되는 셈이지 심지어 권에 되듯이 탐지 창조 칠모.
So we read, for there is nothing that the children of the conquerors should not learn. For the good person who behaves in this way, there is nothing that is non-virtuous. So what Shantideva is saying here is that for such a practitioner who is able to transform every event and opportunities into the cultivation of bodhicitta and awakening mind, then whatever he or she may do actually becomes a form of Dhamma practice. So there is, in that sense, there is nothing that will lead to non-virtue. So then Shantideva writes, one should do nothing other than benefit sentient beings, either directly or indirectly. And for the sake of sentient beings alone, one should subordinate everything to awakening.
Oh yeah. That is what the Shologa Jadu Sumike. Luda Simji Negola Yanda Yando Daja, Dini Konan Donan, Shishin Sumi, Cheni Dos, that Shishin Yongagi, do chick the Chambetum. That Shishin going to 2 million, but the Luda Simji Negola Yana Yando Charachati.
So in stanza 108, we read, in brief, this alone is the definition of introspective awareness, the repeated examination of the state of one's body and mind. So, so this relates to the method for cultivating and applying introspective awareness. And one factor, as we discussed before, is the application of mindfulness. But the other factor is the constant monitoring of what goes in one's bodies and mind. So with that, we finish the reading of the chapter on guarding awareness. So we will read from the next chapter, which is the chapter on the perfection of forbearance. So in order to practice and cultivate forbearance, first of all, one needs to reflect upon the benefits of forbearance and also the disadvantages of giving in to the opposite of forbearance, such as anger and hatred and so on. So we read in stanza 1 and 2 the following: anger destroys all the good conduct, such as generosity and worshipping the Sugatas, that has been acquired over thousands of eons. There is no vice like hatred, and there is no fortitude like forbearance. Therefore, one should earnestly cultivate forbearance in various ways. So the next, the stanza 3, when we read it, it is also wonderful. So where we read the following: the mind does not find peace, nor does it enjoy pleasure and joy, nor does it find sleep or fortitude when the thorn of hatred dwells in the heart. So this is something that is very observable, directly observable.
Oh yeah. That is the so chuboti. Choya dai tell us dunge dan chebul jul kanshi jim de chon jomba tenen de da shan days.
So then we read stanza 6, which states that one who recognizes hatred as the enemy, knowing that it creates suffering such as these, and persistently overcomes it, becomes happy in this world and in the other.
So nujili chimini so come di sungu yore.
So from stanza 7 on, Shantideva is presenting the practices pertaining to the form of forbearance that deals with that takes the form of being indifferent to harms perpetrated against one by others.
다들 남산 shedan 게임 유산에 shedan 게베 그동안 shedan 냠부 된사야 수금도가 한데 shedan 게야디 이 미디오 용두산에 디 shedan 게임 그래. 근데 이 미디오 와야 저래.
So here, one significant point Shantideva is making is that he is not suggesting an application of an antidote that we can use at the very moment anger or hatred arises. So he's not suggesting that. What he is suggesting here is to apply an antidote at the causal stage of hatred and anger. So he writes, for example, he talks about how to apply antidote against the sense of frustration or sense of disquiet, which serves as a condition for arising of anger. When he writes in stanza 7, finding its fuel in discontent originating from an undesired event and from an impediment to desired events, anger becomes inflamed and destroys one. So Shantideva is explaining how to apply antidotes at the causal stage of anger and hatred, particularly with targeting the discontent.
So that's the sort of good. Chilo boja target gawe yin zhugmicha. Miga chaja tuanmendu gyawa dangni nyambanjo. Kadi chosu yana tela miga chachi. Mari tela miga jishi. Kadi chosu yana tela miga jishi. Kadi chosu mena tela miga chachi.
So then we read in stanza 9 and 10, even if I fall into extreme adversity, I should not disrupt my happiness. When there is frustration, nothing is agreeable, and the virtue is forsaken. And then he writes, if there is a remedy, then what is the use of frustration? And if there is no remedy, then what is the use of, if there is a remedy, then what need is there of frustration? And if there is no remedy, then what is the use of frustration?
Recent month, I repeat this word.
So recently, during the recent months, I've been reciting these lines almost in the manner of mantra.
Very, very helpful. Very helpful. It's a reflection of these words makes you more realistic. That's important. That's important. So Nangbech is a realistic sudo.
So to be a Buddhist practitioner, what you need is a commitment to realistic approach.
Yeah.
So in the subsequent stanzas, Shantideva explains the fact that since this sense of discontent and frustration and unhappiness really arises often on the basis of our attachment to the 8 mundane concerns, so he's presenting various antidotes that could be applied to our attachment to the 8 mundane concerns.
Tadi nishtamati. 어떤 디 줄줄줄로 하대. 개베 도매 중요하니 심지어도 녀미자. 녀모 남도 윤지선은 나 봐. 그래서 군람으로지 디스 막 소리는 디송수. 대 하다데 녀모 남다 윤제베 걸리야. 다 아니 강의 연구です. 말 아니 기분 두시싱에 수지 말 왔어. 그래서요.
Then we read stanza 19 where Shantideva writes, not even in suffering should a wise person disrupt his mental serenity, for the battle is with the mental afflictions, and in battle, pain is easily obtained. So in reading this, Kun Lama Rinpoche told me that when a Bodhisattva practitioner, when he or she is engaged in combating the afflictions, there is bound to be a lot of difficulties and hardships involved in this. And Kun Lama Rinpoche said that in any case, when someone is going on a battle, nobody really expects it to be joyful and happy.
이게 뉴문 실은 미 방에서 송샤데 자기가 온데 집에 쉬어도 벽에 온데 집에 쉬어 송니 아니 뉴문세 냠충중제스다 자기가 온데 집에 쉬어도 아니 뉴문 냠충중제도 뉴문 속에서 사도 와서 쉬면 뉴문을 애좀 보면 말이 송하는 게
So in the earlier section, when Shantideva talks about how the afflictions can be eradicated by applying the antidote of wisdom, and there is in the Tibetan translation a repetition of the word affliction, afflictions and afflictions. And Kun Lama Rinpoche explained this on the level of, from the point of view of the Tibetan version, and then also from the point of view of kind of a etymological meaning of the Sanskrit term. So
렉자게나 카가르샤 뉴문 실비 방사이도와 뉴문사 그 당부때 뉴문 실업시다리 카가르샤
So although in the Tibetan translation there's a repetition of the word affliction twice, but in the Sanskrit version these two words are different.
바라까 바까라 있는 순간 니버디 클래시
The Sanskrit word klesha is for afflictions, and in the Sanskrit version apparently there were two terms used, and the first term has the connotation of something being weak. So the reference here is that the weak afflictions which are weak will be eradicated by the antidote of wisdom. So here I remember making the observation to Kun Lama Rinpoche that this can't be true because afflictions are actually very powerful. And then Kun Lama Rinpoche immediately replied saying that, well, no matter how powerful they are, but they don't have atom bombs, they don't have nuclear bombs.
That is one. That is what 동네 탐지 캐서는 시당라서 단조마 대다 제지 보호대 탐으로 쓰고.
And then Shantideva writes in stanza 20, those who conquer the enemy while receiving the enemy's blows.
This one. This one.
Sorry. I think the Tibetan translation is slightly different. Those who...
20th.
20th, yeah.
20, yeah.
Those who conquer the enemy, such as hatred and so on, while sacrificing in the face of all the hardships and pain, they are truly victorious heroes. The rest just kill the dead.
단디네 동네기 사실 타지도 도고서야 요마다데 샤야 동네 연된 뼈에 잡았어. 코어바는 이지 딜러듯이 gelaka.
And then in the next stanza, Shantideva is explaining that it is not the case that sufferings have no qualities at all. It is just something completely undesirable. And he writes that suffering has another quality since arrogance diminishes because of despair, and one feels compassion for beings in the cycle of existence, and fear of sin, and a yearning for the conqueror state.
단디 주고데 티벌라서 동네기 중내처럼 미토 세미나도 찌디토 대답군자 땡기고 스타트 백해서 뭐래. 땡기고 스타트 처지네 규데 규유왕의 종. 루부고 땡기왕의 종. 다고 뒤루셨는데 ቄ 나서봐 왕의 용대하지 민주잖아요. And
then in stanza 23, Shantideva is making a very important point when he writes, 22, I am not angered at bile and the like, even though they cause great suffering. Why be angry at sentient beings who are also provoked to anger by conditions? So by reflecting upon the way in which anger arises, Then, of course, there are the underlying causes. Then there are also the immediate conditions. So one understands the arising of anger within the context of this network of causes and conditions. And in this way, there is no real source to blame at. And this understanding of the dependent nature, the interconnected and interdependent nature of relationships which give rise to anger is a very important point.
So usually, our experience, if we examine carefully, when we develop anger, then there is some kind of target, something absolute, something independent. So therefore, when we look from the viewpoint of interdependency, then this enemy not just all of a sudden happen, but it due to its own previous causes and also the present different conditions, including my own attitude. So then, when we realize or when we saw is that vast sort of area which causing this particular sort of enemy, then you lost independent target. So it is then not easy, is it, to develop anger to everybody, including oneself. So then the intensity of anger immediately reduces. So this is very, very important. That also the realistic approach. Actually, that troublemaker is not independent, but due to many other factors, once you saw, you see, that holistic view, then anger lost. Anger finds some kind of confusion. Anger reduces. So one my scientist friend, he told me, when we develop anger, hatred, the object which we develop anger, that appears 100% negative, harmful. But actually, he says, 90% of that negativeness is mental projection. So exactly the same explanation which come from a Buddhist text, like that. So these negative emotions are unrealistic, exaggeration. So that brings unrealistic approach. That creates trouble. So realistic approach is highly necessary. In order to develop realistic approach, your understanding of the reality is very, very essential. In order to know the reality fully, you have to adopt wider perspective. Isn't it? The scientific way, isn't it? Yeah. So then, motivated by
So having raised the point about the utterly contingent and thoroughly dependent nature of these various factors giving rise to these negative emotions, and then Shantideva raises a possible objection, presenting non-Buddhist classical Indian views about the concept of absolute eternal agency, and then these views are being negated in the subsequent stanzas.
So, full stop. See you again tomorrow.
조선